Welcome to the Naked Life Podcast, where stripping is a way of life. I'm your host, Lo Wentworth. Shall we get started? Because I know you're ready. Hello and welcome back to the Naked Life Podcast. I'm excited you guys are here. We're going to continue talking about validation and as it pertains to the fatherhood wound, the masculine and feminine energies, and what that looks like. And I talked about sacred validation last week, and we'll continue talking about it, not only because I have the signature mastermind program coming up in January that if you haven't claimed a spot for, claim it. There's also limited VIP options available where you have Voxer private access with me during this whole process about sacred validation, healing your relationship with yourself, coming home to you. Validation. So just a mini recap on talking about what validation is. Validation is the act of affirming a person or their idea, feelings, and actions as acceptable and worthy. That is what validation is. Affirming you are worthy. Affirming that your actions, your ideas, your wants, your needs, desires, whatever it may be, are valid, and learning to validate within yourself. And you can't shift out of old patterns, break old patterns, different mindsets until you acknowledge, aka validate yourself and where you are at. As a society as a whole, we were taught to second guess ourselves and seek outward validation that somehow we're good, we're doing it right, like we're following the rules, like somehow society became our parents. Long convoluted thing. Not going to go down that rabbit hole. But anyways, so when we also take sacred validation, sacred, basically, you're entitled to respect. You're entitled to your own respect. You're entitled to your own validation. And it starts with you. So for you to be able to show up in any relationship, any at all, you have to validate yourself. You have to respect yourself and what that looks like. So as we talk about the masculine and feminine energies, and also how it pertains to the fatherhood wound. So this episode, I'm going to talk more about the fatherhood wound and share what I'm going through, how I'm navigating that in essence as in real time versus maybe it's taken me a few weeks and this is what I've learned over the few weeks or a month to get there, versus the motherhood wound, what I share with you with my own validation, using my voice and speaking my truth and setting boundaries. That comes from my motherhood wound and aka sisterhood wound, which is also a motherhood wound that took me a long fucking time to get to and through and comfortable in. And now I'm realizing more and more that without acknowledging the fatherhood wound or healing your masculine energy within yourself, it doesn't matter how you show up in your femininity. There's always going to be this need to seek approval and validation, this fear of abandonment. Because I think the wound of fear of abandonment and not being good enough actually truly comes from a fatherhood wound, not actually a motherhood wound. I think it's just been encapsulated in that. Although it probably also comes from a motherhood wound. But I say it comes from a fatherhood wound because for females, it has been, at least for me, it's been challenging to find that group of sisterhood because of the competitive, because of the gossip, because of the slide comments. Just being the overall mean girl, having that space for, women just to hold while you are going through what emotional chaos you're going through at the moment. And it doesn't have to be emotional chaos, just whatever emotions are coming up and really supporting you. So, and having that community. But I think the breakdown in the motherhood wound and not the fatherhood wound, but also in the sisterhood wound is also the fact that we have this underlying father wound that no one's ever really addressed. Like, it is the root cause. So, for example, my grandfather, who is one of the last modern woodsmen of our time, when he is clearing, setting up his garden in a field or going after a weed, a lot of times and during specific weeds, you have to get to the root of it. So he doesn't necessarily like some going after some weeds, because you have to get to the root of that weed to pull it out so it never grows again, because weeds are very smart. You cut off the tops of them, and without taking out the root, they'll be able to grow and populate again. So that goes down to whatever, we'll just take the fear of abandonment, because fear of abandonment is abandoning yourself, and you abandoned yourself long ago because there wasn't someone there, and I'm going to say a masculine, who held that safe space for you to just be your chaotic feminine self, to hold it and allow you to be who you are. And so since they abandoned you in that sense, you abandon yourself to try to be whatever it is you deemed or thought would make you worthy, and therefore you abandon yourself. So when you start coming to building the self-identity of who you are or who you desire to be, one of the things you have to acknowledge is that you abandoned yourself. Self-abandonment. People pleasers, this is the prime example, is people pleasers abandon themselves. Children of narcissistic parents or emotionally unavailable parents. And I talked about the last episode, like the difference between narcissists are emotionally unavailable, but not all emotionally unavailable people are narcissists. And that sometimes in your journey you become emotionally unavailable, and that's okay. But going back to like the fatherhood wound. Now let's address the fatherhood wound. So one of the coaches that I follow, she says this very eloquently at the core of like what it is. So right now, this is not my words, but these are hers. And I felt like she spoke them, and I don't need to come up with my own version of this because it's very, very clear what it is. So every woman has inside of her the little girl version of herself who deeply craved and needed to hear and feel from her father, "You are safe. I've got you." She needed this deeply to be held, to be protected and loved and cherished for her tender heart and all that she is, in her feminine expression and vulnerability by her father. Like you just think of it like your father hugging you when you were crying or got an ow, your boo-boo growing up. Just enveloping you, accepting you, and letting you know you're safe and that they've got you. And so many women, because I'm taking it from the woman's perspective, many women did not experience this from their fathers growing up. Many of us have gone without a present, loving, protective, masculine father in our lives since we were very young, whether it was because he was emotionally or physically absent, whether he was emotionally or physically abusive, neglectful, or he died when you were very young. So since you didn't have this example of a father figure who was there loving you and protecting you and letting you know that you were safe, you did not learn to be safe within yourself as well. And since you did not learn to be safe in yourself as well, you sought outside validation, and somehow seeking validation from others, the outside world, means that you are safe and that you are okay and protected, loved, and cherished. But the issue being is if you don't have this example of what a healthy masculine looks like that can hold the space of the feminine chaos, and mind you, I don't use chaos in the negative aspect. I think everything in life has a duality. There's positive chaos, there's negative chaos. And I say in the chaos, feminine chaos versus like the masculine chaos, like the masculine is more orderly when we think about it, like the protector, the provider, has these containers that fit in nicely. Like men can compartmentalize, I butchered that word, but they can put things down and put them away. Like, I mean, you see it like men can beat each other and then be good. Where women, we can be catty bitches. Like, come on, we can be that. But also the emotional chaos, since like the women, like we are creation itself. I mean, every month we go through a death and rebirth cycle. Like we create children, we birth them, all of that. So it's a lot of chaotic and a lot of creative energy that requires a lot of different, I don't want to say modalities, but like atoms and molecules to be created and configured together in a perfect sequence that men just don't necessarily have. They're kind of linear, and women are kind of just like all over the place. which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But since we all hold the masculine and feminine energies within us, a lot of times women who have grown up in homes with a fatherhood wound or a father figure who is absent, we'll just go with that way, absent in some capacity, and he was absent, therefore we didn't feel safe. So we didn't have someone showing us and holding the space to say that you're safe, I've got you. So since we didn't have that example, we don't know what that looks like for ourselves. So then a lot of times, especially if our essence is feminine, and I'll get into that in a moment, our essence is feminine and we don't feel safe, we get triggered into our masculine. So this concept of like the 3 U's and 3 C's came from when I listened to an episode on the Skinny Confidential with Marie Forleo. And she got this from Tony Robbins on his Date for Destiny event that he does. And it talks about like the 3 U's and 3 C's. So when someone who is in their feminine, so we'll just do a female. And I'm keeping this very easy and simple. Man, masculine, woman, feminine. Simple as it is. And then I'll get into like what the essence are. But for a woman who gets triggered in her masculine, the 3 U's are what causes her to get triggered in her masculine anyway. It could be unseen, unsafe, and unheard. So unheard, unseen, unsafe. So I was listening to her being like, well, yes, I felt unseen most of my life and unheard. That is also a projector wound. I am a projector with the human design. But I was just like, that doesn't really resonate as to why I had developed my masculine as a survival tactic, whether it be healthy or unhealthy. And then when she was like unsafe, I was like, oh, I have felt unsafe most of my life. So therefore, when you feel unsafe and you're a feminine, you get triggered into your masculine. So your masculine becomes your armor. Now on the male side, the flip side, the 3 C's of when the male is triggered into the feminine and takes the feminine armor is when it's controlled, criticized, and closed heart. So like when you're trying to control them, you're criticizing them for going left instead of right, giving them directions, and closing off your heart as a feminine. They get triggered and the masculine gets triggered and goes into their feminine. So that's where you have the beta males come in. But going back to the fatherhood wound and how it is for the feminine and how we were triggered as young girls, it could be it's a lot of times it's absence of a strong father figure that makes you feel safe. I've got you. Also, a lot of us are triggered into the hypermasculine and trying to be the masculine and beating the men at their own game, which is ludicrous. Like, come on. Men and women are like apples and oranges. You do not compare the best of the best apples to the best of the best oranges. Like there's no competition there because they're completely different category, completely different genetic makeup. It's the same for men and women, masculine, feminine, not male, female. But it also goes into that society as a whole has tricked us and packaged male traits to be somehow worthy or desirable as female traits, which they are not. Or they have different definitions of like strength and independence. Like, I am not going to get in a weightlifting competition with a man. Like, please, come on. They will beat me every time. Anything that has some sort of physicality with men, like, no. Women aren't going to be able to beat them at their own game with the physicality. Not going to happen. Different men can beat each other at their own game in the physicality, but like, no, women aren't going to beat men at their game with physical prowess. Like, come on. You may try, some may want to beat the records for men. I just don't see the point of trying to compete and prove yourself that in male dominated fields or male dominant traits that, you got that and that somehow that's feminine. It's like you're taking on these masculine traits that aren't necessarily who you are, what your essence are, to prove you are worthy, which is the fatherhood wound that you don't actually feel safe, that somehow you have to get this validation of like the male community and have these masculine traits to be worthy of love and safety and acceptance and valid. It's just ludicrous to me. But as a society, that's what we have been taught. And now there's a shift going in between with like the femininity and the masculine and feminine coming into sacred union and all of that, which may be like above people's heads at the moment if you don't know what that is. Just Google it on YouTube, search it on YouTube, or you could search it on Google. But when it's talking about the fatherhood wound, which is the masculine wound of you don't feel safe, you don't feel like someone's got you. So when we're talking about validation in the sense of acknowledging yourself and validating yourself, you have to validate like the masculine container of your past. What it is, what it looked like, how people showed up, how you felt, like different traits, patterns, cycles that showed up that you are deciding you are going to break. Now, only choose one at a time. Some of them are like, a lot of them could have a root negative pattern. So just like when you go back to the fatherhood wound, in the sense of a lot of times how it affects the sisterhood wound is in the sense, since somewhere along the line, we no longer had the safety and protection of the masculine. Since we lost that container that the masculine provides for us to feel safe and that they have got us, then that triggers in how does that come to the feminine is like the feminine needs a direction. They need to be led in some way. And it's not coming from like if we go to the sexual side of like the dom and the submissive, like it is not saying that the masculine is going to be deciding all the decisions for you as the feminine. It just creates a lane, a funnel. So like a lot of times, and with women, it can just, one of the things that I come up with like the masculine and feminine brain is a book called The Queen's Code. And she puts in there the example of how for women, if there's a dirty sock on the floor and the man just leaves it there because it's not bothering him, he doesn't need a goal unless the goal is like, got to do the laundry, pick up the dirty socks to do the laundry. Where the feminine who would nag her man to pick up his dirty socks or his dirty underwear off the floor, and he wouldn't really do it because he didn't understand, because you're not explaining it to him and you may not know how to explain it to him in the way that is supportive of you. But that being is like in the brain, if there is something out of place, so this dirty sock in the middle of the bedroom for the woman, if there's something out of place in her environment, it throws her off into chaos. It makes her feel unsafe. It just takes your brain opening to 15 tabs on the computer and you're still trying to find out where the music's from as you see the spinning wheel of death come on. Like you're just like, ah. But if you explain to him in the essence of the goal is to make you feel safe, that to have your environment feel safe, and that this dirty sock is just throwing you off. I know I'm bastardizing this explanation and it's very simple. But once you explain that to them in the way of using language that is like to receive as the feminine, the men are more inclined to pick up their dirty sock when they understand receiving, how it supports you, how it turns you on, how it makes you feel safe and taken care of. Going back to the sisterhood wound and motherhood, since you don't have the container of the healthy masculine, creating a space for you to feel safe, loved, and accepted in, then it's really hard for the feminine for her to feel safe, loved, and accepted in, and even validate what her feelings are. Since it's in society, we're driven and have been taught to be driven by the masculine traits, when it's just you want men to be the best version of themselves and you want women to be the best version of themselves. Like, I don't want to compete with my partner. I don't want to be equal with my partner in the sense of taking on the masculine traits to somehow be equal. I want us to be partners and equal in our own respective lanes. Like, he's the apple, he's the best apple, I'm the best orange, and we just love each other as we are and are the best possible partners for each other in our own lanes. Like, I don't try to overcompensate in the masculine. He doesn't try to overcompensate like in the feminine. Like, that is not our lanes. So I said earlier about our essence, and I went on a long tangent about that, but like the essence being feminine or masculine. You could be a female and your essence could be masculine. That could be just your home base, but the outward container is you're a woman. Totally fine. And vice versa for a man. Perfect. Totally fine. Take what resonates with you. Like, it's no skin off my back, like what you identify as yourself, because really it's more important for me to hold the space for you to understand who your identity is, validate your identity, and go from there and know that it is you, that this identity you're creating is you. So if you're a woman who identifies mainly as the masculine, as your core essence, as your home base, not something you learned as a trait, as we talked about with the father wound and the masculine energy, imbalance of that within yourself, you will know if that is your essence. And I'll give myself as an example. So since up until maybe 5-ish years ago, 6 years ago, Jesus, how old am I? Okay, yeah, about 7 years ago, when I had my awakening and realizing that I was living from a space of masculinity and hyper masculinity, but that is not my home base. My home base is femininity. And it's just very interesting how this is coming up right now, because I declared 2023 as my year of the feminine. Like, holding those bars, full court press, just going all in. And I'll bring you guys along for the ride on that one. I mean, I'm bringing you along for the ride now, because talking about the fatherhood wound. So I knew when it was figuring out like what your core is as the masculine, feminine energies, when it was like femininity, it was like my chest and heart chakra expanded with that. I'm like, oh, this is my home base. But I was conditioned to be in the masculine because, one, I needed that to protect myself since there was a lot of chaos in the home growing up. So there wasn't that safety net of having that strong masculine figure be like, you're safe, I've got you. And also with trying to prove myself and proving that I'm worthy in society and loved and accepted and going all of being the overachiever. That is like how I developed in my hyper masculine, because people will negate the femininity or being the fairer of the sex or the weaker of the sex, like blah, 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 blah. Again, apples and oranges, people. Apples and fucking oranges here. Masculine versus feminine. Come on. I'm not going to even play the game of which is the weaker sex. Different things. Apples and fucking oranges, people. Apples and fucking oranges. But that would also, people would perceive women like me who were developed in their hyper-masculine and viewed as a leader, all of that, moving forward, trailblazer, whatever that may be to them. Like, some of them would ask me what my sexual preference is. They would ask me if I was gay. And I would get so fucking annoyed and roll my eyes, be like, no, I am not. I am not that. I love me some popsicles. No tacos. No tacos. No. And I looked at that and viewed that, and it was most likely women who are in their hyper-masculine, people or society just assume that, which is complete bullshit. You shouldn't assume that based on the energy that they give off, because a lot of times when, especially I'm in a new place or unknown environment, like the masculine energy comes up anyway because I feel a little unsafe. That's unknown. But if I'm in a safe environment, we'll say to speak, or I feel safe, and all of a sudden it feels like my masculine energy is being triggered, it means there's something that came into my environment that makes me feel unsafe. So I acknowledge that, and I work through that, and I understand that. And that's just a glimpse of how I've healed my relationship with my own masculine energy. And I'm now fully able to be like, all right, let's play in my feminine essence, my feminine energy, and what that looks like. So then that brings me to the fatherhood wound and the fear of abandonment and what I've had to go through recently, and acknowledging that my father has very strong narcissistic characteristics. He is also not the only narcissist in my family. But it's just very interesting, me healing and looking back and viewing all of that and not having that healthy space provided from him to feel safe, to feel like he's got me, because there was that trigger of I didn't know if I just breathed wrong, if he was going to jump down my throat for something. Like, it's very, very trigger happy in releasing his rage on others and using people as a emotional punching bag. And he's the classic case in that, but there are other people in my family who also do exhibit the the female narcissist characteristics. And that's just very interesting to view how different they are. In the sense they're similar because of how they use everyone as an emotional punching bag, but how they use them is different. But acknowledging that and just realizing that there have just been some things that I've learned that I'm no longer available for. And there have been comments made that I am just finally accepted and taking their word as it is. One of them being there was an argument where I was told I wasn't family for the second time. And I'm like, fine, if I'm not family, I'm done. I am done. These are the boundaries I've set. I'm no longer, this person's no longer has the privilege of being in my life in any capacity. I don't necessarily have the option to cut them out completely, but I have learned where to put my energy, where not to put my energy, and what the boundaries look like. Because there's another relationship that it has taken me about 2 years to get very clear on how I want to handle what happened. And this is just an example. I mean, acknowledging what happened, what you are and aren't available for, is healing the masculine wound within you and your own father wound, because you are saying you are a safe space and that you have got yourself for the first time ever in your life. So if we go back, I do not take responsibility for things I did not do. I do not take responsibility for things that were made up because someone's projecting and didn't know how to navigate their own emotions. I do take responsibility for things that I did that caused or were in proximate cause. And I know those are legal terms, but even in law, you have to draw the line of what is causation and what is proximate cause and what is just like completely out of bounds here. And so it's the stuff that's completely out of bounds that I do not take responsibility for, not even to placate the relationship and make things okay with the family, like sweeping things under the rug. And so I was discussing this with my coach as well about acknowledging what that boundary is and where you put this energy. So this person is a female narcissist, and I got blamed for something that I didn't do. I was told by this person that I didn't do it, and then I was also told, this person also said they're aware that they're projecting on me. But yeah, I was the one that had to prove I wanted to heal the relationship, and then proceeded to tell other family members different stories. So going through that and just realizing, looking at that and realizing what it is I want from that relationship, and will I actually get the closure I need to move forward. And I know I won't. I won't get the validation. I won't get the closure. I won't even get the apology or the ownership that this person was wrong and would take opposite action. And it's like, I know this is a morbid analogy, but it's like beating a dead horse. And I'm not going to. Like, I'm not going to get what I need. So I have to give that to myself in whatever capacity that looks like. And also I have to give that to myself because in order for me to move forward, otherwise I won't move forward and I'll still be giving my power away to this person. So since I've decided this, that I'm not going to have this conversation with this person, I'm not going to share with them how their actions were harmful, and because they're not going to change their actions because they don't see that they did wrong in this in any capacity. And so since I've learned from other relationships when I've tried to get that closure, that in some places, yes, I got it. I got what I needed. And I know what that feels like differently, like energetically in my body, versus knowing where not to put my energy to, because just my intuition and knowing and the energy of this person that it's not going to happen. And that takes time and practice, which again is validating your feelings in whatever moment it is, to telling you that you are safe with you and that you have your own back. So you're creating this container. So boundaries are like the masculine containers of your life, to support you in your feminine energy, to create, to be wild, like a wild horse, just roaming, running free, doing as you please, having fun and being playful, and also allowing some of these masculine containers come in. Like another example of a masculine container right now is this podcast. You're listening to your podcast, whether it be on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. That's a masculine container holding the audio, and the audio is the feminine. That's the free flowing of creativity coming through and talking. And getting back to like healing the masculine within you will support you in living your life as your feminine energy, and validating that, and validating the fact that, you know, men and women are apples and oranges. Like, we in our own right are powerful fucking human beings, in the masculine as the man or the female, or in the essence of masculine, feminine energy. Feminine in that spot, if that is your true essence, whatever it is, but you can't compare them as such. And the such of like apples and oranges is going back to that. And just speaking further on that, like, the world is so deprived and so wants this father masculine figure to say, I've got you, and you are safe, and being able to model that for them, that sometimes you have to learn that within yourselves. But you can also find examples of them out there in the world, whether it be on Instagram, if you still use Facebook, even on like podcasts. There's some examples out there for you somewhere. Or you can create like a hodgepodge of what that looks like. I know, I think a few years ago when I was working on like what I want in a healthy relationship with my mate, what that looks like. Currently single, but what that looks like for me. And I was just like, there isn't an example out in the world that's like, yeah, that is what I want. There were several different traits in different couples. I'm like, yes, this is one thing I want. This feels good. This feels good. This also feels good. So then it's just creating a hodgepodge of what that example is to look, what that looks like for you. Especially if you're trailblazing and being your own role model, you are able to create that identity and have that validation within yourself by taking different traits of other people that you either have, want to cultivate, or desire to create in yourself. Like you have but haven't cultivated it, or you're just like, I want that, but how do I create it? You see these examples to create this identity, and this creates a validation within yourself. So when you see these characteristics, those are the masculine containers of characteristics, whether it's integrity, responsibility, honesty, like creativity, speaking your truth, writing, coloring, I don't know, painting, whatever it may be. Those are different characteristics. That is like the male container is the word. We'll just say integrity. That's the container, but what integrity means to you can be something vastly different. It could. A lot of times with the definitions of things, so like validation, I mean, what was it? Validation. The definition of validation is the act of affirming a person or their ideas, feelings, and actions as acceptable and worthy. Okay, that is the textbook definition, but what does validation look like for you? Like what does feeling worthy and accepted look like for you? And you just write that out. Yes, this is also a manifestation tool, but again, if you don't acknowledge like where you've come, and you don't acknowledge what it is you want, you are never going to be able to move forward and be your full identity, or actually be valid and validate yourself. You're never going to feel whole, because you're not taking that time to define what it means to you. Yes, there are similar traits, thus textbook versions of definitions out there for us that condenses everything into one little definition, like the definition of validation, but you still have to define it for you. Just like there's a term for what success is, but you got to define what success looks like for you. Success could be have a multi-billion-dollar business as a female. Success also could be raising kids, being the mother you can be, and still have fun little hobbies on the side, like whatever it is, and still create your identity outside of the relationship with your children or that you are a mom. Because I've worked with a lot of moms who, they lost their identity in who they are when they became a mom. And I think a lot of that also does societal terms of putting so much pressure on the moms to be everything and anything all at once that they lose sight of what they are themselves. I enjoy working with mothers. I actually enjoy with anyone who's going through a transition in their life of releasing their old identity into their new identity. That's just fun because I get to hold the masculine container in the coaching to be able to allow you to be this creative, free-flowing, feminine, and let your inner little girl out to play and figure out what it is and who you want to be, and be the example of that validation of like that masculine, holding the masculine container of being like, I've got you, you are safe. So when you see that and feel that, like, okay, I got me, I'm safe. Like, I know what that looks like. And it's just fun. And because then it's also, I can bring in some playful observations and ideas for them to try. So that brings into my own feminine essence. But I wouldn't be able to do that with coaching at all if I didn't understand my relationship with the masculine and healing my own fatherhood wound and no longer choosing to abandon myself. The fact of feeling abandoned a lot of times does come from, it comes from the fatherhood wound. How many women seek daddy's approval and want to be worthy of them, but never get it because they're emotionally unavailable, or they weren't taught what it looked like to support women or the feminine in a healthy way. And a lot of it that I know that comes from like communication and different things. Like I know the masculines need to protect and provide and fix and solve solutions, that sometimes it's a communication switch of like the feminine sometimes just needs to be held and witnessed. They don't need the solution. A lot of times she does have the solution. She just needs someone to hold space for her to feel safe enough to express her emotions, because she never felt safe enough to do it on her own. Especially like if you had to be hyper vigilant growing up and somehow to adapt and be the chameleon to survive, to somehow just feel safe enough to breathe without becoming an emotional punching bag. It's also very interesting because this year I have read a lot of romance novels, and they're more on the smut side. And I realize now, so a lot of times I follow my intuition, and I've learned to follow my intuition and not question it. The answer will provide itself. So those of you who are listening, if you're new here, I've experienced sexual abuse, sexual trauma. And so when I started reading smut books, or dark romance books, like contemporary, rom-com, like all romance, all smut, some you could say like the erotic, but it's just, if there's no plot and it's just like every other scene is a sex scene, like no, I can't do it. Like you need to intrigue my brain somehow. But I was just reading it. There is nothing that I wouldn't read and experience, and it helped me in healing my relationship with my own sexual desires and not make myself feel wrong in the sense of wanting to try different things, create different scenes, whatever that may look like for me, or be open to trying, because I realized like halfway through the year, actually not even halfway, like over maybe a month or so ago, that these are women's fantasies. And some of these women are making a shit ton off of it, and they're not being like ridiculed for it. They're being celebrated for it. And reading that, I'm also a pattern seeker, and there's a common theme, and they use the term alpha hole, which I think is degrading in the sense, because asshole, alpha hole. But it also being in the sense like these masculine alpha men who exhibit what we would call healthy masculine to their feminine, like being the protector, being the provider, also being in tune in their own feminine energies and their own emotions, to be able to like guide and lead the feminine. So the feminine want to be guided and led. They like receiving. So how you treat your women in your life or the women in your life is a direct and how they treat you is a direct reflection on how you treat them. So if you treat them like a sack of garbage, expect that you will be treated like a sack of garbage as well. But it's a fine line between emotional abuse and domestic abuse on there. But going back to talking about the romance novels and them all the men having these strong masculine traits on the array from the hyper alpha all the way down to, I don't want to say not beta, but just on the spectrum of alpha, like the hyper alpha to like the minimum alpha, we'll just go with that, is they all held this space for the female leads in these female leads, holding that space of like, I got you, you are safe. And somehow like showing them for the first time, like that is what it is. And that's just showing like the healthy fatherhood wound, the healthy masculine holding that space for the feminine and understanding that men and women are fundamentally different. That holding space for the women to be the chaotic self and coming to you to feeling that safety, to feeling loved and protected is the pinnacle of it all. And that's what women actually want and desire. They desire it so badly. Otherwise, the romance novel isn't like a multi-billion-dollar industry. Reading all of those and seeing that and seeing the pattern, like women are they so want this. And we right now as societies, the first world countries, are being challenged with the fact of what a healthy alpha masculine looks like. And I think sooner rather than later, we'll see a lot more healthy masculine alphas out there. And they won't be saying that they're alphas. If they say that they're an alpha, ladies, red fucking flag. Run the opposite direction. Run. No one should say, oh, I'm an alpha. It means you're a douchebag. Just like you shouldn't have to be like, oh, I'm confident in my own skin. Like, I'm amazing. If you have to say I'm confident, you're not necessarily confident when you're trying to prove your worth to someone. Like, it should just exude who you are. People know that I'm confident when I enter the room because of my stance, because of how I walk into whatever space that is, not because I walk in announcing, I'm the confident one. No, that is not how that works. And that's you. If you do that, that is actually you seeking validation from outside instead of being like, yes, I'm confident in my own skin. I acknowledge, ooh, this didn't feel good. Or, ooh, I'm not feeling so confident in this right now. Like, how can I shift this? Or just being okay that you're trying something new and you're not feeling confident. Like, you don't understand how much confidence comes from just acknowledging the fact that you feel uneasy about trying something new or you lack confidence in that to yourself. You have the ability to hold space to be seen and feel safe within your own self. And that's healing this masculine wound that you have. But going back to the romance novels and seeing this, there's a man I follow on TikTok. And I'm not on TikTok. A man I follow on Instagram because the algorithm gods just showed up there. And he's much older than I am, dating, single. And he posted a reel, and the image caption, so the words on the image was like he's looking for a like strong, independent, I think something else, and can squat a lot type of woman. And I was just curious, and I went into the comments and I just looked. I wanted to shake it and tell him like, stop trying to prove yourself to these unhealed feminine, these wounded feminine. They were wounded, one, by just his presence in alone, because he is very much in his healthy masculine. I think that's why he's attracted a lot of females. I mean, that's why I'm following him. It's just to absorb his healthy masculine essence. And that's an example of what it looks like to me. You could follow him and be like, ooh, I don't like that. That's fine. There could be someone else out there whose masculine essence is just like, ooh, that feels good. That's what I want. Like something like this. And I was reading, I'm like, these wounded female saying, men say they want a strong and independent woman, but they can't, like, they're wrong. They can't handle that. Well, that goes into, like, the motherhood wound of them, of not having healthy mothers. But if we don't have healthy fathers, or like healthy masculine figures to show us what it looks like to be healthy in our masculine, like, a lot of men out there are still little boys. They have this little boy energy, and if they're not aware of it and working on that to build up to be that strong masculine man, what that looks like to them, instead of trying to maneuver and manipulate themselves into whatever society is telling them that is a masculine man, just like us as women trying to mold ourselves into what is society is telling us what is a feminine woman. It's all complete bullshit. You got to decide for yourself what that looks like for you. But I was seeing that, and he posted a question on his stories about, like, is this impossible? I didn't reply because I'm not ready to actually be seen by this human yet. But it got me thinking, is like, yes, it's possible because you want it. But the issue being is, what is your definition of a strong, independent female? Because it is not the same definition as a strong, independent male. They are completely different. A strong, independent female can still needs that loving validation and that support from the masculine in their partner, that they are safe, they are being held, that they are heard. That when they need something, that they're able to receive it from you, instead of feeling like they still have to be in their hyper masculine and be in this independent thing to prove their worth. So you got to define what it's like. You've got to just find what strong and independence looks like, both as the male version and the female version, because they are completely different. Yes, no one wants someone who's super needy and clingy and all of that, or wants to raise a woman who acts like a girl into her womanhood, and male vice versa. I mean, the example being my grandma, who apparently was a brainchild of my grandfather, were trying to plan a blind date with one of the people who works on the combine. And my grandmother said, so-and-so, oh yeah, he's a nice boy. And I immediately looked, I'm like, Grandma, I don't need a boy. I need a man. I don't need a boy. I'm sure he's a nice boy. And she looks at me, she's just like, well, any man, anyone younger than me is just like a nice boy, a nice girl. I'm like, no. Your granddaughter does not want to be in the category, oh, she's a nice girl. No, woman, not even a nice woman, woman, period, man, period. I don't want a nice guy. No, quite frankly, nice guys aren't secure in their masculinity. They're manipulative assholes. They won't be loyal, and they're not supportive for the feminine. Like, no one wants the nice guy. That was another thing I saw in these romance novels, was the fact of all the morally gray men. Morally gray men, not nice guys. They're all morally gray, and they would burn the world for their woman, the female lead character, before they would sacrifice her to the world. Nice guys sacrifice the woman they allegedly love for the world to prove that they are valid and acceptable and good in society, where the morally gray, also known as the villains, quote unquote, are the ones who will sacrifice the world to make sure their woman who they love dearly feels safe, loved, protected, and seen. That is what we want. But we call it morally gray, which is still stupid. But anyways, it's like the women want the morally gray men who are secure in their own values to hold space for them and throw them up against the wall sometimes. It's a long, convoluted thing about, like, the fatherhood wound. As a society, we have a massive fatherhood wound and what that looks like. And it's a generational thing, and passed down through that. Like, there's generational trauma that is passed down. And if you think you're a cycle breaker, if you don't know you're a cycle breaker, it's very easy to know if you're a cycle breaker or not. Did you see something, witness something growing up and decided, like, you didn't want to be that way? That you broke a cycle. You saw something, it didn't feel good in your body, and you decided to be something different and try it out. That is breaking the cycle. I know there's long lists different things or quizzes. I mean, as a society, we make for some reason, a long list of factors and a quiz somehow validates the fact that we're a cycle breaker. No, it's simple. We always like to make things more complex than they are. And if you're listening to this, you're a cycle breaker. You're a cycle breaker. Just take solace in that you're a cycle breaker. You saw something, you want to live a different way. It's simple as that. You don't have to have these very specific things, like having narcissistic parents, feeling like the black sheep in the family, not being loved and accepted for who you are, or whatever that may be. Yes, that makes you feel more seen because you don't feel alone. But the simple fact is, like, you are seen in the fact by someone else because they also decided to live a different way than what they were witnessed, and you decided that. That makes you a cycle breaker. It does. So I'm validating that within yourself. Ooh, this was jam-packed about talking about the feminine and female energy. Female. Words are easy. You can tell I've been talking a lot in this podcast and very fast. I will be talking more about the fatherhood wound and masculine energies and how it pertains to holding space within yourself of being that feminine and what that looks like, and learning how to do that moving forward. Especially when we talk about the holiday season and being with family and what those boundaries are, like, your boundaries are the masculine shield you put up with family so you can feel safe in your own skin. Like, you can decide when to leave. You can decide what family events not to go to. You can decide, I will only show up for 2 hours at this time. I decided I was going to do that at a family Thanksgiving this past weekend, and it was like encroaching on the time that I would leave, but I decided to stay because I was enjoying time with my cousins, and I chose to focus on that and disassociate from the rest of the adults in the house. And we're all adults, we're all grown, but like generationally speaking, the cousins and the adults, like uncles, aunts, all of that, father, mother, disassociating from them and not acknowledging whatever it is, whatever chaos they are bringing, because that was a huge stressor in my life. But also acknowledging that, like, I can be like, oh, well, I'm having fun and enjoying my time with my cousins. I don't want to leave right now. Like, I can feel in that body, like, even though I said, like, I was going to leave at this time, I'm having fun, I'm enjoying, so I will stay. That is also being able to shift through your feminine and masculine energies and acknowledging and validating that you, at the moment, yes, you created this boundary, but applying it and realizing and seeing how things are and being open and curious to how, and allowing things to shift, gives you the permission to also be like, okay, I'm enjoying this time. I want to stay here. I can feel I want to stay here, that I don't necessarily want to go because I'm having fun. Now, if it was the opposite and you weren't having fun, like if I wasn't, I'd have no problem saying peace out. Because there was a family event this past year that I did not go to. I chose not to. I did not want to. I did not want to be around in that chaos. I wasn't even healthy in my own relationship with myself. I didn't want any more of that in. There was also some people there and a very specific person that I do not want to be around. And I would have been in close quarters and it would not have ended well. We'll just put it that way. It would not have ended well. Well, with that, I will see you next week, and know that the Sacred Validation Mastermind, the link is in the bio. Click on it, claim your spot. Like, it will help you and support you gaining momentum in the new year and getting really clear on what it is that you want and desire and what you want to go after that in 2023, not what you think you want to go after. Like, it's no resolution. It's no word of the year. It's really intention setting on like healing your relationship with yourself and what that looks like and what you're committed to during that year, and learning to validate yourself versus what society is telling you and what you should do. It's going to be so much fun. It's going to be so great. You're going to be healing at quantum leaps. Like, it's going to be amazing, and you'll be having a community with you throughout this. So you know you won't be alone, and you will be able to see what other people are going through. And I guarantee what one person is going through, you are also going through. So it'll be fun to watch and witness. And yes, there's a VIP option to work with me privately during this time. You can also select that option. And if you want something deeper, one-on-one, starting now, we can do that as well. I have those. Just email or DM me on Instagram and we'll get started. And with that, I will see you next week. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Naked Life Podcast. Please remember to rate, review, subscribe to this podcast, and share with all your friends.